We're switching gears a little to something a little more municipal and at the city hall level. So over to you, Zach.
Yeah. So accessibility in the city of Whitehorse's snow and ice control policy has been, sorry, this is I really hate puns on news, but it's has been a hot issue. So at the latest city council meeting on Monday, December 11th, a proposal from Councilor Ted Laking was unanimously approved to grant $220,000 in more funding to, quote, provide additional resources to address accessibility concerns in respect to the city's snow and ice control. This motion also approves $30,000 from the city's reserve to go towards a snow and ice control accessibility review for the future to be delivered in May of 2024. So you might have heard about this. What's interesting is the motion also calls for increased enforcement of the city's snow and ice bylaws. So currently, as it stands now, the onus is on private businesses to clear the sidewalks in front of their place of business by 11 a.m. the day after a snowfall. And this is enforceable by a recently upped $250 fine, which only 6 have been issued this year, according to the bylaw supervisor in a December 4th council meeting. And in the existing snow and ice control policy, which was last amended in October 2023, so it remains why that this issue is still an issue. The city is divided into priority 1, 2, and 3 roads. And priority 1 roads need to be opened and ice controlled within 24 hours of snowfall. Priority 2, 48 hours, and priority 3 is 72 hours. So the meeting and previous other meetings over the last few weeks have seen a very large turnout of delegates speaking to council about their personal experiences navigating icy and uncleared city sidewalks and alleyways, as well as being unable to use accessible parking stalls due to if they're not cleared or if how snow gets plowed and piled onto the curbs and para ramps around them, making them actually unusable. So there's 94 accessible parking stalls located downtown, which up to now they've had no special or priority status to be cleared over regular parking stalls. So the significance of this motion is trying to address those issues. One of the delegates who has spoken at many of these meetings was Ramesh Ferris. He's a disability advocate and polio survivor who grew up here navigating mobility and accessibility hazards. So I spoke to Ferris this Friday, and we met at the top of 2 Mile Hill's cyclist and pedestrian path, which under the city's policy is classified as a priority 1 active transportation route, which means it gets priority 24-hour clearance. It is cleared 24 hours after snowfall and graveled, so it's very, priority 1. So the following audio is like an edited excerpt from our conversation there.
And so this is literally goes from the top of 2 Mile Hill all the way down to the bottom. At the start, the top, as you go up the hill, and then the section by the escarpment areas, the pathways by the escarpment areas, the Millennium Trail, the pathway by the airport, the pathway by the new bike lanes that they put by the 2 bike lanes by Save On Foods. Those are all considered active transportation routes. And so the city's doing a great job. They have the skills, and they have the equipment and the products, to make a clear path and make sure that it's safe for active transportation users. but they're, in my opinion, they're putting it in the wrong place. All these people that are using active transportation routes, the cyclists and the runners and joggers in wintertime, using these groomed trails that the city does, it's not prohibiting them from accessing basic programs and services. So what City Council has done is they've stretched the term accessibility to meet their political agenda, to expand their active transportation routes, ignoring people with disabilities, seniors, and First Nation elders, saying we want the city to take over snow and ice clearing from the businesses on 2nd Avenue, 4th Avenue, Front Street, and Main Street, and Grey Mountain Cemetery, because we feel we have the right to access our community. And so we're trying to make the parallel that if you can do it for active transportation routes comfortably and financially approve that, well, then you can financially approve and find in your budget the the money and the services for a barrier-free downtown. And people using wheelchairs cannot even cross the roads or go on a sidewalk because it's not properly cleared, like this active transportation route that we're on right now.
Yeah. So the motion that was approved this Monday, December 11th, it's actually a replacement of an earlier motion by Councilor Michelle Friesen. And that original motion was a little closer to what Ramesh Ferris was asking for, in that it would reclassify all downtown accessible parking stalls as priority 1 road spaces, thereby receiving plowing within 24 hours of a snowfall. This new motion, it has no timeline for when, it's in its non-specificity. There's no timeline or breakdown of specific locations of when accessible parking stalls or sidewalks will be cleared. And the $220,000 in funding approved in the motion is also not budgeted out or broken down in the motion. So this number, $220,000, otherwise appears in an administrative report presented to the City Council on December 4th. It's the estimated cost presented by city staff to an alternative to Councilor Friesen's original motion proposed by city staff. So that would see, quote, snow loading and removal from all downtown on-road accessible parking spaces and the adjacent pararamps to meet the service level of snow removal within 72 hours of a snowfall. So it's unclear if the motion that was approved on Monday, Councilor Laking's motion, and its additional funding is referencing this alternative, the administrative report, and that 72-hour timeline. And if so, why this isn't explicit in the motion's wording. I asked for clarification from the city, haven't received a response by the time of this airing. Either way, on Monday's meeting, City Manager Jeff O'Farrell did not appear to have a plan or timeline on how this money would be allocated, saying, quote, starting to spend this money in January, it would be the city moving at lightning speed, end quote. So with this approved motion, Ferris's concerns remain largely unaddressed. The city should take direct responsibility for ensuring downtown sidewalks and alleyways are cleared of ice and snow, instead of relying on business owners to do so and enforcing this via more bylaw fines.
And I don't think it's the business's responsibility. At the end of the day, I think that businesses have a responsibility, but at the end of the day, it's the city's responsibility to put the money forward and make sure that there's consistency, that people can cross the road and go from one town to the other free of snow and ice, and also have sand put down for traction. Yeah. So there's no consistency now, right? Yeah. So some businesses will do it in terms of clearing snow and ice and putting sand down. Others will just clear the snow and ice but no sand, and then others won't do anything. So That's what we're looking for, is just consistency. At the end of the day, it's the responsibility of the city. Really, mayor and council, they easily could have just said the directive that we are making snow and ice removal to priority 1 for Main Street, Front Street, 2nd Avenue, 4th Avenue, and Grey Mountain Cemetery Access Road. They could have easily voted on that and just directed city to make it happen. They're leaders, and that's what we expect of our municipal leaders.
Yeah, so that's the mouthful lead up to this interview.
Just dialing in the counselor now. Hi, Michelle. How you doing? Great. We're just going to patch you through our soundboard, and I'll hand you over to Zach. Thank you so much for making time for this.
Hi, Michelle. Can you hear me? Okay. Can you hear us?
I can hear you guys.
Okay.
Am I coming through?
Yeah, we can hear you too now. Great.
Perfect.
Thanks so much for taking the time on our first ever show on our little platform. Would you care to just introduce yourself first off?
Sure. Well, congratulations on your first episode, and thanks for asking me to participate. So I'm Michelle Friesen. My family is from the Ta'anquechang Council. I belong to the Wolf Clan. I am a city councilor with the city of Whitehorse, and a mother, and I'm at home. We're in between our Sunday Christmas movies today. But yeah, I live in Whitehorse on the traditional territories of the Kwon First Nation and the Ta'anquechang Council.
Awesome. How are you feeling about the latest city council meeting with a few days to let the decision settle?
Yeah. So if I'm being completely honest, following the meeting on Monday, I was feeling really disappointed in myself. Honestly, I felt like I had let a lot of people down by not getting the policy changes that they were advocating for, and I was really torn in that meeting and in how I wanted to move forward. But I think at the end of the day, I know what my motion was suggesting really wasn't going to solve all the issues and all the problems, and that it was just a start, and it was really just one small piece of this equal access puzzle. And so, like I said, at that council meeting, although it made me nervous to withdraw my motion, it made way for some action to take place in the new year that I really hope will make a difference for people with mobility and accessibility needs. And now I'm just feeling, I'm thankful that we started the conversation. So I do feel that, and I think that we were able to really shift the language and the way that some people were viewing the issue. So I'm really thankful for that, and for all the people who showed up week after week to share their voices. And now I just feel, even more motivated to keep pushing for equal access in our community and just following through on this and making sure that some policy changes can happen before the election later this year, or next year, sorry.
Yeah. So I had a question about Councilor Laking's motion, and it was adopted into the agenda pretty quickly without discussion and unanimously accepted. So I was wondering, did you and the other councillors and mayor discuss the new motion beforehand, before the meeting itself? And if so, how would you characterize those discussions? And yeah.
Yeah, so we always connect right before our meetings. for about 30 minutes, and it's called pre-council. And so it's just an opportunity for us to kind of discuss any changes to the agenda or ask some procedural questions, things like that, about what's going to happen in the meeting. And so Councilor Laking's motion was also emailed to us over the weekend so that we had a chance to kind of review it and prepare for that conversation. But yeah, in pre-council, we just really briefly discussed the procedural aspect of bringing it forward. For example, to add something to the agenda for discussion during a council meeting, you need to have unanimous consent. And so that was something that we talked about, and that's why you saw everybody's hands go up in the room, because they all agreed that they wanted to add it to the agenda. Right. Other things were like what order it would come forward on the agenda, or how, or if I might withdraw my motion, and just kind of where those things would happen. But really the discussion on the issue and the decisions, the decision-making aspect happens in chambers, which is the public meeting that you would have seen. And I think at this point, or at that point when the motion came forward, we'd been talking about snow and ice clearing as it relates to accessibility for like 6 or 7 weeks at that time. And so that's maybe why there was a little less discussion for that addition. But I also just want to add that I really did appreciate Councilor Laking's motion. I think it was a good compromise, and you know, we have the opportunity to continue to push for the policy change pieces, but this is a suggested way, like it keeps the conversation going, and it finds a way to address some of those issues in the short term.
Right. So just to clarify, you were planning on withdrawing that motion during the pre-council meeting?
It was an option that we talked about. I didn't really know what I was going to do, honestly, until I made that decision in the council meeting. It was something I was thinking about a lot, because I knew that this suggestion didn't have the policy change piece to it, which was something that was very important to me, and it was very important to the advocates who'd been showing up every single week. But I also knew that my motion, as it was written, was just one small piece, and it really wasn't going to solve the problems. And so I saw this other option as a way to do something now, but then that we could continue doing that important work of finding a way forward for the policy change to be meaningful and work for accessibility year after year, and so that these advocates wouldn't have to keep showing up.
Yeah, for sure. In terms of the city manager, Jeff O'Farrell, during the meeting was asked about the timeline and implementation of Councilor Laking's motion. Did you feel satisfied with his response to that?
Yeah, you know, I really understand and appreciate that our staff are flat out, and they're doing the best that they can to meet the demands of an ever-growing city. And so my frustration doesn't lie with them, and it doesn't lie with, you know, the response that we got from the city manager. I think what feels frustrating, what I've heard from people the most, is that, you know, there have been a lot of conversations about accessibility in the community, and I know that advocates have been speaking about these issues and barriers for years, and some of them even decades. And so we had our first snowfall this year in November, I believe, and so we started talking about the snow and ice control update in October, and then the original motion for accessible stalls to be cleared was brought forward on November 6th. Through the council discussion, that got pushed out for 3 weeks for more information, which came to us on December 4th. And then finally on December 11th, we were able to vote on the new motion that Councilor Laking brought forward. And then so to tack on another, at a minimum, another 2 weeks before that budget kind of translated into visible changes in the city, you know, from our first snowfall in November to January for that action, I think is where people feel frustrated, because that's however many weeks that First Nation elders and seniors and parents with young children and people living with disabilities have to continue to face these barriers and have to continue to make compromises and decisions about how or even if they can engage and participate and show up. And they did show up every single week to advocate for this change, and they worked and they continue to work so hard to make our city a safer and easier space for everybody. And so I think that's where any frustration on the timeline might come in. I'm looking forward. You know, we'll be able to look at a broader range of solutions and accessibility standards this way, some of which were suggested in our December 4th standing committee meeting, and it will also include looking at proactive ways to work towards equal access in other seasons as well. So, yeah, I think that's where the frustration comes in, but trying to be optimistic and look at the silver lining, I think it gives us an opportunity to learn and make mistakes and do better. So.
Right. So you mentioned that there were discussions about the snow and ice control policy back in October before this sort of became an issue. So I was curious about what was being discussed in October and if accessibility considerations were preemptively, I guess, being discussed before the delegates started coming in.
Yeah, so in October, the amendments that came to us were they weren't accessibility amendments in terms of like mobility issues. They were accessibility amendments in terms of things like active transportation. So, for example, the new Chilcoot Way bike lane was added as a priority 1 on our snow and ice clearing policy. And so, yeah, these accessible stalls and para ramps and sidewalk clearing and the things that we're talking about now weren't really a part of that initial discussion. And there was also some public consultation that happened. There was a survey that went out, and we had over 1,000 respondents to that survey. There was some targeted consultations as well, which included the First Nations and some senior active groups. And so I think that what's been really cool to see over our term is at the beginning of our term, our respondent level was really low. I think on our first budget survey, we had 10 respondents. And so now we're seeing thousands of respondents to these surveys and to these public consultations that we're doing. And I think it's really amazing that the community is showing up and being so engaged, and that they're really interested in what's happening at the city council level. And so, yeah, I think that's been one really exciting thing to see grow over our term.
Yeah. And you pointed this out during the meeting that Councilor Laking's motion in the proposal for a review, you pointed out that just having a review does not guarantee that any policies will change. It just means that they will be reviewed. So as it puts someone seeking to secure some sort of guarantee in a kind of precarious position. So I guess how optimistic are you that this review will actually lead to concrete policy change within I know that as you mentioned, there's a municipal election next year, and so within the time restraints, I guess, that you have facing you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that was one of the things that I thought was really important to point out when I was making that decision to withdraw. So the advocates were really clear with us that they've seen these short-term solutions be put in place before, and however helpful that they may have been, they felt that they then every snowfall that they'd have to kind of start back at square one and come back and continue to ask every year for those accessibility changes. And so like I said earlier, I realized pretty early on that the way my motion was written was not going to make that kind of policy change that they felt that we needed and that, the community was asking for. And so where my hesitancy came in was really not knowing where we might be when the review comes back. So it is our last term on this council, and when the review comes back, we'll be getting pretty close to election time. And so we also have been dealing with some pretty huge climate change emergencies like the landslide. And so I worry about something like that coming up during this timeline. And, I am optimistic, though, that this council has heard and they understand on a different level now the kinds of barriers people are facing and the changes that need to happen. But, that for sure was part of my hesitancy and remains a concern. And I think it also remains like a fuel for me to want to really stay on top of this and just follow through and keep advocating for those policy changes and keep bringing those voices to the table. And, it's like some of the things I mentioned on our last meeting, we need to remind ourselves about who's not in the room when we're making these decisions, right? Like we had advocates who didn't feel safe to come to city council and be a delegate and speak to us in person because they didn't feel that it was going to be accessible for them to get a parking stall and to get up on the sidewalk and to get up to the chambers. And so we need to remember whose voices are missing, who's not in the room, who's, not shopping downtown, who's not able to volunteer or fully participate in our community. And so I really also want to stress that, all the credit for this hard work in terms of accessibility and bringing these points forward and really driving this message home goes to those advocates and to those allies in the community. And it's just going to remain really important to me to keep bringing those voices and that representation to the table. So.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Councillor Friesen. Zach has one more question for you, but I just wanted to say thank you. And it's really tough. Like, I think we can understand and appreciate the challenge of trying to respond to something like this, both quickly as well as making sure it's not just a Band-Aid solution. And just like even the poetry of the elevator not working at City Hall and one of the councillors even being, just all of that, I think it really underlined how immediate and urgent this is, but it's not going away.
Exactly.
And go ahead.
One of our advocates too, Eva, they talked about wheelchair eyes. Yeah, and if I can just leave that with people too, because it's, I've really become highly aware of barriers when moving around the city through this and also through becoming a mother and just trying to push a stroller around town, right? So this affects so many people in so many different ways. And so I would really challenge everyone to spend some time looking at the world this way and just looking, next time you're downtown, just keep your head down and notice the snow and notice the barriers and notice how wide the doorway is or how wide that parking stall is. And so it really makes you understand how, as an able-bodied person, we can really take that privilege for granted.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so I thank you so much. I had a little bonus question as I before we were on the call. I was just talking about it. The the using the term or the title "Your Worship" in reference to the mayor, is that I couldn't find it in any of the city bylaws, and I noticed that you did not use that. So I was wondering if what the history, or if you have any thoughts about that.
Sorry, I couldn't quite catch the last part of that.
Oh, just if you're refraining from using it during the meeting was deliberate, and yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, actually, it actually is intentional. It was something that I just felt and knew immediately that I just didn't connect with, or it just didn't feel right for me to use that language in that space. And it was one of the things that I felt like I could control in how I want to interact in that system. And so as the first Indigenous woman to council and only the second Indigenous voice in Whitehorse City Council's history, it was really important for me to show up and to do things differently and to take up space in a way that resonates with me, and to make those changes towards reconciliation and just a different kind of accessibility, right? I wanted to try to, however small, make changes that I hope will make the next generation of leaders feel more safe and more welcome in those spaces. And so that title is very colonial, and it's it's just something I chose not to use as one small example of how we can compromise and make space for diverse voices and backgrounds to sit around the table and not all be forced to really fit inside these boxes and structures that don't resonate with us.
Yeah, that's and have any of the other councillors tried to follow suit or anything?
Honestly, I didn't even know if anybody had noticed that. So you're the first person who has noticed that, or has at least brought it to as a question to me. So yeah, it was just something I chose. Okay. It was something I just chose not to do. I didn't. There wasn't a conversation about it or anything. I just didn't do it. So
okay, cool.
Amazing. Shonithan, Gunashish, Councillor Michelle, thank you so much. We appreciate you when you're in City Council, and also the fact that we get to be in community with you and Theo, and just everything that you bring to the table.
Oh, thank you so much. It's really a pleasure and an honor to be there and to learn and to listen from the community. And thank you so much again, Shonithan, for inviting me to your first show, and I can't wait to continue to be a listener.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Take care, and we'll have you back when we can. Bye. Wow, Zach, that was terrific. Great job. Really, shoveling into the story.
Oh God.